Well, that terrified me and the people that I've been talking to over the last few weeks to a level that I've never seen before, and myself personally. Let's break it down. First of all, there's roughly 5,000 of these regional banks, and these banks, Robert, are responsible for roughly 70% of all the small business loans in the United States. And the small businesses have traditionally represented anywhere near 40% of GDP in this country. They are the backbone. These are the banks where you walk in and they say, "Hi, how's your family? How's your dad? How's your mom? How are your kids? Oh, I'll see you at the Little League game tonight. How's the new business going?" And they make loans based upon relationships, not upon balance sheets and business plans. They are more of a piece of the community for all of middle America. And the majority of all the small businesses in this country have relied upon these banks because of a relationship. And where a business plan and a balance sheet may not stack up so well with one of the big 5 or 6 commercial banks, it works with the small regional banks. And so what she said was, when being interviewed and in a House subcommittee inquiry, the gentleman, the representative from Oklahoma, said, "Madam Secretary, I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. You just bailed out Signature Bank, and you just bailed out the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank. Now, if one of my constituents in Oklahoma, who has $5 million in a regional bank, goes bankrupt, if the bank goes bankrupt, will that depositor be bailed out and everyone else, all of the banks in Oklahoma?" And she said, "No, sir, they won't be. It will have to be determined by an uber majority," as she termed it, "between the FOMC, which is the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, myself, and the president." So in essence, what she was saying is that they will be judge, jury, and executioner. But if you really look at what she's saying, she is basically saying that if you have money in any of the banks that are not systemically too big to fail, then you better get it out, because they will fail and you will be bailed in, and there's nothing that you've been warned. And the question then becomes, which banks are too big to fail? Which banks are systemic? And when you have a small business or your life savings in a place where you thought it was safe and you never speculated to begin with, what's going to happen? Are you going to risk that to chance? And so she's lit a fuse under literally 5,000 banks in this country that have been the cornerstone of the small businesses and of middle America, forcing everyone into a handful of very large commercial banks. And it's a very, very frightening situation for most of these people to have to come to grips with either staying with the relationships they have and hoping for the best while not really preparing for the worst, or yanking their money out and moving it into one of the large commercial banks, which she's telling us will not fail. We will backstop the too big to fail banks. And in essence, she's creating socialized banking, putting everyone into just a handful of very, very large banks. In the last 2 weeks, I have never experienced the level of anxiety and fear I'm feeling right now. It's almost like a vat of butter poured over my head, and it's just coating me with people's anxiety. The level of fear and anxiety, and it's awful. I mean, people are terrified right now, and they don't know where to turn. Some are turning to precious metals, and others are turning to short-term government treasuries, and others are moving to the big banks. But the amount of money being yanked out of these regional banks, which is going to have a domino effect, is extraordinary. And so Mexico has formally applied. The rumor is Japan, Australia, and New Zealand are contemplating. If I had to sum it up, Robert, I guess I would say something to the extent that what it really symbolizes is that the United States and their actions have done more to destroy itself, in the past few years than any external enemy could have ever done, because we weaponize our source of power, which is the US dollar. And we have driven most of the world away from it as a result. And the majority of the world's populations reside in the areas that comprise the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt Road Initiative, and the Eurasian Economic Union. This growing group of people that are rallying together against this type of hegemony, this type of, as you called it last time, bullying, and the perception of hypocrisy. and they are rallying away from the West. And really, that's what it talks about, the ramifications of what really does that mean if we lose the petrol reserve status. And that's kind of what number 2 and number 3 talk about. Number 2 was it's happening. And I guess today we would talk about what happens when it does happen and
Yeah.
what is it that is happening. Right. And there have been a lot of things that are happening, and we'll talk about this one first. And this is the president of Kenya, who, innocently enough made a deal with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, both of which have been our allies, right? Both of which are joining the BRICS nations and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They're all on the Belt Road Initiative. So in and of itself, Kenya saying to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates that we will buy your oil from now on with Kenyan shillings instead of US dollars, in and of itself is not as big of a deal. I talk about the game of Jenga where you pull pieces out and finally the whole thing tips over. But what was very interesting about what he said was this piece where in the first 30 seconds, more or less what he says is, let me give you all some advice who hold US dollars. The term he uses is you should go to the nurses. Now, I guess there's a little bit of translation there that in terms of his command of the English language, but he said in the next few weeks, this market will be very different. In essence, he's intimating that something, some event, whatever that event may be, is going to happen in the next few weeks that will affect the dollar, that those holding dollars should do what they need to do right now, he says, because in the next few weeks, this market will be very different. And I found it to be rather concerning on a broader sense. Again, each and every one of the things that I have talked about for the last 3 years, really screaming to the public in every video I've done since 2020, every one of them, the central theme has been about the loss of the petro standard, the growing chorus of countries, starting with the Belt Road Initiative and ending with the BRICS nations and everything in between.